ink met parchment, before empires named the rivers, before telescopes measured the sky, there were stories, stories carried in breath, in firelight, in drumbeat, in the hush between thunder and lightning, across southern Africa, from the high escarpments of present-day Zimbabwe to the rolling plains of South Africa. There are whispers older than colonization, older than written record, older even than the borders that now divide the land. They speak of a bird, not a bird of feathers alone, not a creature bound by bone and muscle, but a being of storm, the Thunderbird. Among several Southern African traditions, especially within Nguni and Shona oral histories, there exists the legend of a colossal lightning bird, sometimes called the Impundulu, sometimes simply known as a lightning bird. It is said to live in the sky, concealed within thunderheads. It does not build nests in trees. It nests in clouds. When the horizon darkens and the air becomes heavy, when the wind grows still and even insects fall silent, elders say the Thunderbird is gathering its strength. It does not arrive unnoticed. The first sign is pressure, a weight in the atmosphere, a hum beneath the skin. Then the sky bruises, deep purples, charcoal grays, a strange green light that turns cattle restless and makes dogs whimper. And when thunder cracks across the land, the old stories say, that is not the sky breaking. That is the beating of wings. Unlike ordinary birds, the Thunderbird does not flap to stay aloft. It commands the storm. The storm carries it. Lightning is not an accident of charged particles. It is the fire that spills from its eyes, or the sparks that fly from the friction of its wings cutting through the sky. Some traditions describe it as immense beyond comprehension, wings stretching from horizon to horizon. Others say it can condense itself, folding power into a more compact form, appearing the size of an eagle before expanding into something far greater. It is never described as small, and never described as weak. In certain accounts, the Thunderbird is not purely animal. It is a spirit being, a messenger, a servant, or perhaps a manifestation of higher ancestral forces. Among some healers and diviners, stories persist that the lightning bird can take human form. It can walk among villages unnoticed. It can love. It can curse. There are tales of sudden lightning strikes that split a hut in half, killing one person while leaving another untouched. In those moments, some would whisper that the Thunderbird had chosen its target, not randomly, deliberately. To ancient communities living in intimate relationship with the land, storms were not random meteorological events. They were communications, warnings, judgments, blessings. Rain meant life, lightning meant power, thunder meant presence. And behind that presence, the Thunderbird. One widely told variation speaks of the bird descending in a pillar of lightning, striking the earth with explosive force before vanishing back into the clouds. In the aftermath, the ground would be scorched, sometimes fused into glass. Cattle might refuse to graze near the site. Children were warned not to play where the lightning had struck, because that ground was touched by the sky, and the sky was alive. Some versions describe the Thunderbird's feathers as metallic, shimmering like hammered iron. Others say they appear blacker than the storm itself, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Its eyes are most consistently described, glowing, not glowing softly, glowing like coals stoked by wind. It is rarely portrayed as benevolent in a simple sense. It is power without apology. In certain accounts of the Impandulu Injosa tradition, the lightning bird is associated with witchcraft, sometimes described as a familiar spirit that can be sent to strike enemies. In these narratives, it feeds on blood or life force, sustaining itself through violent energy. Lightning is not just electricity, it is hunger. Yet even in those darker interpretations, the Thunderbird is not purely evil. It is force. It represents the truth that nature does not conform to human morality. The same storm that destroys crops fills rivers. The same lightning that kills also fertilizes soil through nitrogen fixation. Creation and destruction share the same wings. Long before atmospheric science explained electrical discharge between cloud and ground, communities understood storms in relational terms. They knew that something vast and powerful moved above them, something unpredictable, something that demanded respect. The Thunderbird gave that power a face, a shape, a story, and stories matter. They carry knowledge in symbolic form. They preserve warning systems. They encode environmental awareness. When elders warned children not to stand beneath tall, isolated trees during storms because the lightning bird favored high perches, they were also transmitting survival guidance. Stay low, stay sheltered, respect the sky, or risk being chosen. There are also tales in which the Thunderbird is tied to leadership and divine authority. Chiefs were sometimes metaphorically linked to thunder, their voices described as rolling like storms. In poetic praise songs, powerful leaders were compared to lightning birds, swift, decisive, impossible to ignore. The symbolism expanded beyond weather. Thunder became a metaphor for command, lightning for decisive action, the bird for dominance. In some regions, shamans and traditional healers claimed dreams of the Thunderbird before significant life events. A storm vision could signal initiation into spiritual work. It could signal danger or transformation. The Thunderbird was not merely observed, it was experienced. And these experiences were shared in circles of firelight, each retelling adding new detail while preserving the core truth. The sky is not empty. It is inhabited. Anthropologists who later documented fragments of these stories often misunderstood them, reducing them to superstition. But oral traditions are rarely simplistic. They are layered, symbolic, multifaceted. The Thunderbird is at once weather phenomenon, spiritual messenger, moral warning, symbol of power, embodiment of fear, and guardian of cosmic balance. It exists in liminal space in between seen and unseen. Consider the psychological dimension. Imagine living in a time without modern forecasting. The horizon darkens unexpectedly. Wind tears through grasslands. Lightning splits trees with explosive force. Thunder rattles the chest cavity. It feels personal, intentional. To name that force, to give it identity, is to reclaim some measure of understanding. The Thunderbird becomes a framework through which chaos becomes narrative, and narrative becomes survival. But the legend does not remain static. In drought seasons, when thunderclouds gathered but refused to release rain, there were murmurs that the Thunderbird was withholding blessing. Rituals were performed, offerings made, songs sung to call the storm down. In flood seasons, when rain fell without mercy, flattening crops and swelling rivers beyond their banks, it was said that the Thunderbird was angry, or perhaps battling something unseen in the heavens. Some traditions speak not of one Thunderbird, but many, a flock of storm spirits clashing in the clouds, their battles echoing as thunderclaps. Lightning became not singular strikes, but weapons thrown mid-air. Children would count seconds between lightning and thunder, measuring distance without realizing they were calculating the speed of sound. But in story, that delay was the time it took for the Thunderbird's wings to close after a strike. There are rock art sites across southern Africa depicting large bird-like figures. While interpretations vary, some researchers speculate that certain oversized avian shapes with outstretched wings may reflect early mythic imagination tied to storm beings. Whether literal or symbolic, the image persists. Wings spanning the sky, claws gripping cloud, eyes lit with fire. And then there is the silence before it arrives, the stillness that presses against the eardrum. Livestock shifting uneasily, birds disappearing from open air, the metallic scent of ozone creeping across the land. That moment, suspended between calm and chaos, is perhaps the most powerful element of the legend, because it mirrors something deeply human: anticipation, the awareness that change is coming, that something vast is about to move. In many ways, the Thunderbird myth teaches preparedness, respect for forces beyond control, humility in the face of scale. Humans are small beneath storm systems, fragile beneath lightning's path, but they are not powerless. They can seek shelter, they can read the signs, they can listen to elders. The story becomes instruction. There are even tales where a brave individual climbs a mountain during a storm to confront the Thunderbird, either to challenge it, learn from it, or bargain with it. In most versions, the encounter is overwhelming. The human collapses from fear or awe. Sometimes they survive transformed, marked by white hair from shock, or granted prophetic insight. Sometimes they do not return, because some powers are not meant to be touched directly. Over centuries, as colonial influence spread and Western scientific frameworks gained dominance, the literal belief in the Thunderbird may have diminished in some communities. But legends rarely die. They shift, they adapt, they move from literal sky into symbolic psyche. The Thunderbird remains embedded in proverbs, metaphors, and cautionary sayings. A person with a volatile temper might be described as carrying thunder in their chest. A sudden tragedy might be referred to as lightning from a clear sky, even if the meteorological cause is known. The language persists, and through language, the bird survives. Even today, during particularly violent storms across southern Africa, social media fills with videos of towering cumulonimbus clouds, branching lightning bolts illuminating the night. Some comments joke about the lightning bird returning. Others speak half seriously, invoking old names. Because somewhere deep in cultural memory, the myth still resonates. It is difficult to stand beneath a sky exploding with thunder and feel nothing, to watch lightning fracture darkness and not sense presence. The Thunderbird legend endures because it aligns with lived experience. Storms are dramatic, emotional. The atmosphere itself becomes theater, and in that theater, the Thunderbird is protagonist, not gentle, not tame, but magnificent. So when we ask where the Thunderbird began, we may not find a single origin point. It likely emerged organically from countless storm encounters, woven through generations, shaped by geography and spiritual worldview. It is as old as thunder, as old as fear, as old as awe. And perhaps that is the truest origin story. One day, long ago, a child looked up at a storm-black sky and asked, "What makes that sound?" An elder answered, "A bird." And from that moment, the sky was never empty again. The storm that never left. The world has changed. Satellites orbit above the clouds. Weather radars pulse across continents. Storm systems are mapped in real time. Lightning strikes are logged by the second. We can measure the voltage, track the pressure, predict the rainfall. And yet, when thunder rolls across open land, when lightning fractures the night sky, when the air tastes metallic and the wind bends trees toward the earth, something ancient still stirs. The Thunderbird did not vanish when science arrived. It transformed. In the modern world, myths rarely disappear. They migrate. They reshape themselves inside language, art, psychology, and identity. They move from literal sky into symbolic meaning. The Thunderbird is no longer just a storm being. It has become an archetype, an emblem of power, of transformation, of uncontrollable force, of necessary destruction. Across southern Africa, the lightning bird remains embedded in cultural consciousness, even when the name is not spoken directly. Storm metaphors persist in poetry, in protest songs, in praise chants, in political rhetoric. A leader may be described as thunderous. A movement may be called a gathering storm. A revolution may be said to strike like lightning. The imagery is not accidental. It is inherited. In visual art, contemporary African painters and digital illustrators often reimagine the lightning bird in abstract form. Wings composed of fractured light, bodies formed from cloud and electricity. Some portray it metallic and futuristic, merging ancient myth with cyber aesthetics. Others depict it in traditional patterns, woven into beadwork and textile design. The Thunderbird becomes a bridge between past and present, between oral tradition and digital canvas. In spiritual spaces, particularly within syncretic belief systems that blend indigenous practice with modern interpretation, the lightning bird is sometimes invoked as a symbol of awakening. Not literal lightning striking a hut, but metaphorical lightning striking the self. A sudden realization, a life-altering event, the storm that forces growth. Because storms do that. They uproot what is weak. They clear what is stagnant. They flood what has been dry for too long. In psychological terms, the Thunderbird represents disruption, and disruption is not always negative. In therapy language, breakthrough moments are often described as lightning bolts of insight. Trauma can feel like a storm that rearranges internal landscapes. Grief rolls like thunder, echoing long after the flash has passed. The Thunderbird, as symbol, maps cleanly onto these human experiences. It becomes the embodiment of emotional intensity, the part of life that cannot be predicted, the event that splits time into before and after. Modern storytelling continues to echo this symbolism. In novels and films inspired by African mythologies, storm birds appear as guardians of sacred knowledge or harbingers of cataclysmic change. Graphic novels depict colossal winged beings woven from cloud and circuitry, hovering above futuristic cityscapes. Even in global popular culture, separate from African tradition, Thunderbirds appear in fantasy franchises and superhero narratives. While culturally distinct from Southern African legends, their recurring presence across civilizations speaks to a shared human fascination with sky power. Why birds? Why thunder? Because birds occupy the space humans cannot naturally inhabit. They traverse the sky. They move between earth and cloud. They symbolize transcendence. Add lightning to wings, and you create a creature that bridges worlds, terrestrial and celestial, mortal and divine. In a world increasingly dominated by technology, the Thunderbird also symbolizes something that cannot be fully controlled: We can seed clouds, we can track hurricanes, we can build lightning rods, but we cannot stop a storm from forming. We cannot command the sky, and that reality matters. Modern society often operates under the illusion of total control over climate-controlled environments, digital systems, economic flows. The Thunderbird shatters that illusion. It reminds us that scale exists beyond human architecture. Consider the rise of climate anxiety. As extreme weather events intensify across the globe, storms feel personal again. Wildfires rage. Floods displace communities. Lightning storms ignite grasslands. News headlines carry footage of skies that look apocalyptic. In those moments, ancient myth feels less distant. The Thunderbird becomes a metaphor for climate imbalance, the storm unleashed by a human excess. It represents the reckoning of natural systems pushed too far. Some environmental activists even use storm imagery deliberately. Posters show lightning splitting smokestacks. Murals depict giant birds formed of storm clouds hovering above industrial landscapes. The message is clear. Nature answers, not in words, in weather. On a more intimate scale, individuals adopt the Thunderbird as a personal symbol of resilience. Tattoo culture, for example, frequently reinterprets lightning birds with stylized wings, often paired with phrases about strength, rebirth, or survival. Why? Because surviving a storm changes you. People who endure illness, loss, addiction, recovery, or trauma often describe their experiences as storms. When they emerge, they feel transformed, scarred, perhaps, but stronger. The Thunderbird becomes the mark of that survival. It says, "I have faced thunder and remained standing." There's also a gendered dimension in some reinterpretations. In certain Southern African traditions, the lightning bird was associated with feminine spiritual power, particularly in narratives involving shape-shifting and occult knowledge. Modern feminist readings sometimes reclaim this imagery, reframing the Thunderbird as a symbol of untamed female force. Not gentle, not compliant, not domesticated but commanding. Electric, sovereign. Artists explore this through powerful imagery. Women with storm-filled eyes, hair flowing like thunderclouds, wings emerging from shoulders in arcs of light. The myth evolves to reflect contemporary conversations. It always has. Music, too, carries the storm forward. Drums echo thunder. Bass lines roll like distant rumbling. Lyrics speak of lightning love, thunderous rage, storms of change. Even when audiences no longer consciously reference the lightning bird, the archetype lives in sound and metaphor. Because myth does not require belief to function. It requires resonance. And thunder resonates in bone. There is something physiologically undeniable about a storm. Low-frequency thunder vibrates the chest cavity. Lightning's flash imprints on retinas. Ozone sharpens the air. The sensory experience is immersive. The Thunderbird symbolizes that immersion. The moment when environment overwhelms the individual. In leadership psychology, some theorists speak of Thunderbird moments, pivotal disruptions that redefine trajectory. A company collapse, a political upheaval, a global pandemic, events that strike like lightning and leave landscapes permanently altered. Before, after, that binary mirrors the mythic strike. Lightning is instantaneous, its consequences are long-lasting. And so the Thunderbird in modern symbolism becomes the marker of irreversible change. In education spaces exploring indigenous knowledge systems, The lightning bird is often reintroduced not as superstition but as environmental narrative. Teachers explain how myths encode ecological awareness, how storm deities reflect deep observation of weather cycles. Students learn that indigenous cosmologies were sophisticated interpretive systems, not primitive misunderstandings. The Thunderbird becomes an entry point into discussions about epistemology, how different cultures understand natural phenomena. Science explains the mechanics. Myth explains the meaning. Both can coexist. In contemporary African speculative fiction, often called Afrofuturism, storm beings are reimagined as energy entities woven into advanced civilizations. Cities powered by lightning harvested from sky creatures. Pilots riding thunderbirds across neon horizons. These narratives do not discard tradition. They amplify it. They place ancient symbols into future landscapes, asserting that African myth belongs not only to the past but to tomorrow. The Thunderbird becomes timeless. Outside formal art, everyday language still carries it quietly. When someone says, "That news hit me like a lightning bolt," they invoke the same archetype. When a coach tells a team to bring the thunder, the symbolism remains intact. Power, force, impact. In trauma studies, there is recognition that intense experiences can feel like sudden storms, overwhelming, disorienting, electrifying. The Thunderbird's violent beauty mirrors that complexity. It is terrifying and awe-inspiring simultaneously. Duality defines it. It destroys and nourishes. It frightens and fascinates. It punishes and purifies. That duality is deeply modern. We live in contradiction. Technology connects and isolates. Progress heals and harms. Storms are natural and increasingly human-influenced. The Thunderbird holds that tension. In corporate branding, storm imagery is sometimes used to signal innovation or disruption. Lightning bolts in logos, wings in angular form. Though rarely directly credited to African legend, their symbolic lineage remains archetypal. Because across cultures, Thunderbirds exist. But the Southern African lightning bird carries distinct undertones: shape-shifting, moral consequence, ancestral involvement. Those elements make it more than a weather symbol. They make it relational. The storm is not random. It is connected to human action. This moral dimension resonates in modern ethical discourse. Environmental degradation, social injustice, political corruption, all are described metaphorically as storms brewing. The Thunderbird becomes the inevitable consequence of imbalance. You cannot poison rivers and expect clear skies forever. Eventually, the wings gather. In mental health narratives, there is also the idea of riding the storm. Mindfulness practices teach individuals not to suppress emotional thunder, but to witness it, allow it to pass. In this sense, the Thunderbird symbolizes emotional energy that must move through rather than be resisted, because storms that are denied often return stronger. The myth becomes psychological metaphor. And yet, despite all reinterpretation, something literal remains. Stand outside during a violent high-veld thunderstorm. Watch lightning fork horizontally across cloud banks, illuminating vast layers of atmosphere. Hear thunder roll for 20 seconds straight, echoing across hills. In that moment, explanation does not erase awe. You may understand ionization and charge separation, but your body still reacts. Your pulse quickens, your skin prickles, you feel small. And in that smallness, the ancient narrative breathes again. Maybe there is something up there. Maybe the sky is not empty. Modernity did not kill the Thunderbird. It democratized it. The legend is no longer confined to fireside circles. It exists in podcasts, YouTube documentaries, academic journals, tattoo studios, protest murals, digital art marketplaces, and whispered jokes during thunderstorms. It survives because it adapts. It adapts because storms remain. As long as thunder rolls across southern African plains, as long as lightning splits acacia trees and rain pounds tin rooftops, the archetype will persist. It may no longer be universally believed as literal creature, but it will always be felt as symbol. The Thunderbird now represents the force of change, the inevitability of consequence, the beauty of power unrestrained, the warning that nothing is fully controlled, the reminder that transformation is rarely gentle. In a world obsessed with calm surfaces and curated lives, the Thunderbird insists on turbulence, on honesty, on rawness. It is the scream in the sky that says, "You are not in charge of everything." And that truth, unsettling as it is, can also be liberating. Because if storms are inevitable, then survival is strength. And if lightning strikes, then rebuilding is possible. The Thunderbird is no longer just a myth in the clouds. It is a symbol in the bloodstream of modern culture. It is the storm inside the self, and it is still flying. I saw the Thunderbird. I was 13 the first time the sky changed color. Not gray, not blue, not the soft white haze of summer heat. It turned the color of something alive, bruised, breathing, waiting. The morning had been too quiet. Even now, years later, that is what I remember most. The silence before it began. Our village sat on open land, where the grass rolled in uneven waves, and the horizon stretched so far that the sky felt enormous. Storms were not unusual. We knew the rhythm of rain. We knew the rumble of distant thunder that came and went like a passing truck. But this was different. The air felt heavy, thick, as if it had weight. When I stepped outside, the wind did not greet me. The trees were still. The birds were gone. Gone. No swallows cutting the air. No doves calling from rooftops. Just silence. My grandmother was already standing in the yard. She did not look at me when I came beside her. She was watching the western sky. "You feel that?" she asked. I nodded. I did not know how to explain it, but it felt like pressure behind my eyes. Like the moment before you cry. Like the pause before someone says something that changes everything. "The lightning bird is moving," she said quietly. I laughed. Not because I did not believe her, but because I wanted to believe she was joking. She was not. The first thunderclap did not roll. It cracked. Sharp, violent, close. It felt like the air had split open above us. I flinched so hard my knees almost gave out. And then the wind arrived. Not gently. It tore across the land in a single violent sweep, bending the grass flat. Dust spiraled upward. Tin sheets rattled. A loose bucket skidded across the yard like it had been kicked. My grandmother grabbed my wrist. "Inside," she said. But I did not move, because the clouds were doing something I had never seen before. They were not drifting. They were folding. Layer upon layer of black and deep purple massed together, climbing higher and higher, swelling into a tower that seemed to touch the edge of space. Lightning flickered inside it, not striking down, moving within, like veins glowing beneath skin. Another crack of thunder, closer, too close. The metallic smell hit my nose, sharp and electric, the kind of scent that makes your tongue feel numb. And then I saw it. At first, it was just movement, a darker shape within darkness. But storms do not move against themselves. Clouds do not carve out space inside their own mess. Something was there, something vast. The lightning flared again, brighter this time. And for half a second, the sky became white. In that flash, the shape was clear. Wings, massive, not flapping wildly, no. They moved with slow, deliberate force. Each downward sweep of those wings was followed by thunder, not after, with. The sound did not chase the motion. It accompanied it. My breath left me. I did not realize I had stopped breathing until my chest burned. The Thunderbird. It was real. Not a story told over cooking fires. Not a warning for children to behave. It was there, above us. Its wings stretched wider than anything I could measure. The edges blurred into cloud as if storm and creature were not separate things but the same body. Lightning ran along its feathers, not striking it, flowing through it. Its head turned, slowly, and though it was impossibly high above us, I felt it look down, at the land, at the houses, at me. Another flash. This one closer, so close the air snapped and my ears rang. I fell backward into the dirt. The thunder did not sound like a boom. It sounded like a roar, a living, furious roar that shook the ground beneath my palms. Rain began in sheets, not drops, sheets. Within seconds I was drenched, hair plastered to my face, mud soaking through my clothes. Still, I could not look away. The Thunderbird dipped lower, not descending fully, but enough. Enough that I saw its eyes. They burned, not like fire that flickers, like coals that have been fanned to life, steady, intense, ancient. There was no randomness in its movement, no panic, no chaos. It glided through the storm as if it owned it, as if the storm was an extension of its will. Lightning struck the ground beyond our cattle fence. The impact exploded dirt upward in a violent spray. The sound came instantly, a deafening crack that left my ears ringing. Our cows bellowed in terror. A tree at the edge of our land shuddered as another bolt struck it. The trunk split down the middle with a splintering scream. I screamed too. Not words, just sound. My grandmother pulled me by the collar and dragged me toward the house. This time I let her. We stumbled through the doorway just as another blast of thunder hit so hard the windows rattled in their frames. Inside, the house felt too small, too fragile. The roof sounded like it might lift off with the wind. We stood in the center of the room. No lights, no talking, just waiting. Another strike. Closer. I could feel it in my bones. Each thunderclap vibrated through my ribs like something pounding to get in. My grandmother closed her eyes. Not in fear, in recognition. She whispered something under her breath. A prayer, maybe, or a greeting. Outside, the storm reached its peak. Wind howled. Rain hammered. Thunder rolled so continuously it became a single unbroken growl. And then, silence. Not gradual, sudden. The rain softened. The thunder moved farther away. The pressure lifted. We stepped outside cautiously. The sky was still dark, but the violent motion had passed. In the field beyond our fence, the tree was split clean down the center. Smoke curled from its trunk. The ground around it was scorched. No fire spread. Just that single violent mark. I walked toward it slowly. Each step felt unreal. The air still buzzed faintly. When I reached the tree, I placed my hand on the blackened wood. It was warm. Still warm. My grandmother stood beside me. "You saw it," she said. It was not a question. I nodded. She did not ask what it looked like. She did not ask how I felt. She only said, "Now you understand why we respect the sky." That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw wings cutting through cloud. Heard thunder that did not echo, but answered. I kept replaying the moment its gaze turned downward. I knew it had looked at me, not because I was special, not because I was chosen, but because storms see everything beneath them. Days passed. Life returned to normal rhythm, but something inside me had shifted. I no longer experienced storms as background weather. Each darkening sky felt alive, intentional. Once, months later, another thunderstorm gathered over the hills. Not as violent, not as immense, but still powerful. I stood outside alone this time. Rain soaked my shoulders. Thunder rolled across the valley, and I felt it again. That hum beneath the skin. The sense of something moving behind the visible. I looked up. Clouds churned overhead. Lightning flickered. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw the outline again. Smaller, more distant, but present. And instead of fear, I felt awe. Pure, overwhelming awe. The Thunderbird was not mine to understand, not mine to control. It did not belong to storybooks. It belonged to sky. Years later, when I left home for the city, storms sounded different. Thunder echoed between buildings. Lightning reflected off glass towers. But sometimes, when the sky darkened just right, when clouds stacked in towering columns and wind pressed against windows, I would feel that old pressure return. That reminder, you are small, you are temporary, the sky is older than you, and somewhere above, power moves without asking permission. I do not tell everyone what I saw. Some would say it was imagination, adrenaline, a trick of lightning and fear. Maybe, but I remember the wings moving with thunder. Not after, with. I remember the eyes. I remember the tree splitting exactly where the lightning struck. Not random ground, not empty field. A single mark. Deliberate. And I remember the silence before it arrived. The silence that felt like breath being drawn in by something vast. Storms still come. They always will. When they do, I step outside. I let the wind hit my face. I listen. Because once you have seen the Thunderbird, you never hear thunder the same way again. And sometimes, in the space between lightning and sound, I swear I hear wings.